This video is about the main process operator. The process operator holds all the other operators and is an operator in its own right. It has some parameters it's worth understanding. So we'll cover those first. We'll also take the opportunity to look at the sub-process operator. As usual, I have a process. So the process is here. It contains two sub-processes. The first is called read log. The second is called random number. These sub-processes, I created them to show what happens when you change these parameters here to the process operator. We'll look at log verbosity, log file and random seed. Result file, send, mail, encoding, I won't cover those in any detail. Might as well get them out of the way now. Result file, that seems to be some legacy hangover really, which if I read verbatim from the screen, file to write inputs of the result writer operators to. I'm not sure what it does, so I never use it. I wouldn't worry about it. Send mail, it's possible to send an email always, never, or when your process is taking too long. I've never used it. Last one, encoding, I always set it to the default. So let's go back to log verbosity and log file. So log verbosity basically controls how much detail is recorded to a log file, or a log view actually. I brought up the log view here, and what you do is you set this to the value that you want. All is everything, off is nothing, in it's a good compromise. So when I run the process, the log file will contain information about what's happening, and I'm additionally specifying a file. You can leave that off if you want, but it defaults to blank. But I'm on a Windows machine, so in a file called ctempprocess.log there will be the log file written. So when I run this, we will see log entries being written here, and if I go to my file system, I can bring the log file in. Here it is. So you can see it sort of matches the log view. There is a subtle difference. There's additional information in the file about where the logging is happening, where it's coming from. So you can see when you set it to init, you get a certain level of information. Now, to make it a bit easier to show this really working, I happen to have written a process. It's actually contained in the read log sub-process that reads the log file as it's being written to. In fact, to be more precise, it reads it up to the point where the process then starts writing new entries. So it isn't a complete copy of the log file that you saw in the text editor, but it does show the essential structure. It makes it easier to show it in one place rather than having lots of windows. So if I go back to the main process and I set this to all and run it again, now what you're seeing is in this view here, this is essentially the log file, and you can see there's a whole load of detail being written. This is the maximum, and you'll actually and I'm sure you're asking the question, why hasn't it appeared here? And the reason is you can actually set another log level here. So if I'd set this to all now and run it again, you'll see essentially all the detail that's being logged is also being copied to this log view. So the general rule is the log verbosity of the process, which is set up here, is essentially the master. This log view, you can, by right clicking, set the log level to reduce the amount of data that's coming towards you. So if I set that back to info, clear it just to show you what's going on. If I run that now, you can see in the actual log file more detail, in the log view not much detail, which is fine. So anyway, you probably use this log facility if you're debugging, or if you're raising a bug and you want to provide some background information to someone who's got to fix the bug, and sticking it into a file is usually the best thing to do. But don't forget, If you do set it up to all, set it back to init or something lower so you don't fill up your disk with rubbish. Okay, one little tip when we're on this view here, this button here will clear the log view when the process starts. That can be nice, just to get you a nice clean view of what's going on. Let's quickly look at then sub-processes. So let's look at this one. So the read log now, I'm not going to show you how this works particularly. I'll just draw your attention to some features of the sub-process operator. It has no parameters, but if I double click on this, you can see it's got stuff inside it. If I make the view bigger, there's a lot going on. You in general can have as many actually inputs and outputs as you want. Now this sub-process is outputting 4 things. The top one here is the log view without any processing. These are some more processing I'm doing. Good practice is normally if I show you the comment view, I tend to give some text details just so to help me understand what I was doing. But obviously you don't need to do that, it's just good practice. If I go up a level, so you can see there are lots of outputs now, and I could join these to the edge here if I wanted. So the sub-process is very flexible, and it means you can hide a load of detail inside here. In fact, if I show you, this is actually sub-processes in sub-processes, and there are quite a lot of them, as you can see. A lot of detail encapsulated in a single sub-process, which is very nice. So let's go back now to the final parameter we'll look at, which is random seed. So what I've done is I've created a process which generates a macro based on a random number. There's a function called rand. I show it to you here, generate macro. I'm creating a macro called random based on this function called rand. When I do that, in this sub-process, you'll see this macro changes. So each time I run the process, focusing here, you'll see rand is 0.623. That random number is generated, it's a pseudo-random number in reality, based on a seed, which if you change that to another number, let's pick a random 5555 for example. If I run this again now, we should get a different random number here. Sure enough, we do. And in fact, if you want genuinely random numbers each time, set this to -1. And now, every time I run the process, I should get a different random number here. 0.916, 0.749, and so on, 0.931. Generally, it's advisable to use the same value in the situation where you might want to recreate the execution of a process that might have gone wrong. Sometimes a random number can change the way something behaves. So it's advisable to know that random seeds can be changed. Some other operators have random seeds in their own right, but generally my experience is the best practice is to set it at the top level rather than somewhere in the middle. Okay, so let's leave this then with one final run of the process with everything set to all, just so you can see everything. Okay, there we go. So scrolling down, you can see here's the detail of the actual log file, and in a slightly difficult to read font there's more the same thing essentially here.